Om Guru Brahma Vishnum Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasme Sri Gurave Namaha Ganana Antva Ganapatigam Mavamahe Kavin Kavinam Upavashravastram Jeshtarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspada Anushrundhoti Visi Dasadanam Om Mahaganadipataye Namaha Om Keshwaya Namaha Om Narayana Namaha Om Namaha Om Govindaya Namaha Om Vishnave Namaha Om Matsudaya Namaha Trivikramaయ Namaha, Vamanaya Namaha, Sridharaya Namaha, Hrishikeshaya Namaha, Padmanabhaya Namaha, Damodaraya Namaha, Sankarshnaya Namaha, Devaya Namaha, Pradyumnaya Namaha, Aniruddhaya Namaha, Purushottamaya Namaha, Adokshnaya Namaha, Narasimhaya Namaha, Achyutaya Namaha, Janardhanaya Namaha, Upendraya Namaha, Hare Namaha, Sri Krishna. Dear friends and devotees, we reach the 12th chapter of the 11th Canto of Mahabhagavata Purana. In this chapter, the benefit of Satsanga, Lord Krishna is telling about Satsanga, benefit of Satsanga. That's the association of super excellence, pure love of the residents of Vrindavana is also discussed. In this chapter, the glories of holy association and the super excellence of the pure love of the residents of Vrindavana are described. The association of saintly devotees destroys the soul's attachment to material life and is capable of bringing even the Supreme Lord Krishna under one's control. This is very important. Association of saintly devotees means satsanga, the group of devotees who got similar intention to achieve liberation and devotion to Lord Krishna combined together called satsanga. The association of saintly devotees destroys the soul attachment to material life. So destroys the soul attachment to the material life and is capable of bringing even the Supreme Lord Krishna under one's control. Neither yoga, Sankhya, philosophy, ordinary religious duties, study of scriptures, austerities, renunciation, works of Ishta and Purtam, charity, vows of fasting worship of the deity, secret mantras, visiting of holy places, nor adherence to any major or minor regulative principles can affect the same result. So satsanga is better than anything else. Any other devotional activities, satsanga is group of devotees working together achieve better increase in Bhakti Marga to reach Lord Krishna. In every age, there are demons, monsters, birds, and animals who are the modes of passion and ignorance. And there are also human beings in the categories of businessmen, women workers, outcasts, and so on, who cannot study the Vedic scriptures. Nevertheless, by the purifying effect of the association of devotees, they may all achieve the supreme abode of the personality of Godhead. Whereas without such saintly association, that is satsanga, even those very seriously enduring in yoga, Sankhya study, charity, vows, and practice of the renounced order of life may remain incapable of attaining the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The young damsels of Vraja, ignorant of the true identity of the Lord Krishna, considered him to be their paramount, who would give them pleasure. Yet by the power of their constant association with Sri Krishna, they attained the supreme absolute truth, which even great demigods like Brahma cannot achieve. The young women of Vrindavana displayed such a deep attachment to Lord Krishna that their minds, which were overflowing with the ecstasy of being with him, perceived an entire night spent in his company as just fraction of a second. However, when Akrura took Sri Krishna along with the Baladeva Balarama to Mathura, the Gopis then thought each night without him to be equal in duration to a millennium of the demigods. Being tormented by separation of Lord Krishna, they could not imagine anything that could give that satisfaction other than Krishna returning to see them. This is the incomparable excellency of the Gopis of pure love to God, Krishna. Supreme Lord Sri Krishna after imparting these instructions to Uddhava, advised that for the sake of attaining the absolute truth, Uddhava should give up all consideration of religion and irreligion as promulgated in the Shrutis and instead take a shelter of the example of the woman of Vrindavana. So this is the summary of the 12th chapter. Now we are going to read the shloka and meaning slowly. Sri Bhagavanuvacha. The shloka starts with Bhagavan telling, Sri Bhagavanuvacha Narodayati mam yogona sankyam dharma evacha na swadhyayas tapasyago veshta nishta purtam na dakshina व्रतानि यज्ञश्चन्दांसि तीर्थानि नियमायमः यथा वरुन्धे रत्सङ्गः सर्वसङ्गोपहो हिमाम्. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, is telling Uddhava, my dear Uddhava, by associating with my pure devotees, one can destroy one's attachment for all objects of material sense gratification. Such purifying association brings me under the control of my devotee. Lord Krishna is telling the devotees can control Lord Krishna by such attachment to Lord Krishna with the devotees, Satsanga. One may perform the Ashtanga Yoga system, engage in philosophical analysis of elements of material nature, practice non-violence and other ordinary principles of piety, chant the Vedas, perform penances, take to the renounced order of life, execute sacrificial performances and dig wells, plant trees and perform other public welfare activities, give in charity, carry out severe oaths, worship the demigod, worship the gods, chant confidential mantras, visit holy places or accept major and minor disciplinary injunctions. But even by performing such activities, one does not bring me under their control. So Satsanga, a group of devotees who are similarly interested in increasing Lord Krishna's devotion, together making a satsanga, will achieve a better, nearer to Krishna in our effort of Bhakti Yoga and Bhakti Marga. The commentary of Srila Jiva Goswami on these two verses can be summarized as follows. One may serve the devotees of the Lord through ceremonial worship or by actual associating with them. Association with the pure devotees is sufficient for self-realization. That is satsanga, because one can learn everything about spiritual advancement from such devotees. With perfect knowledge, one can achieve all that one desires. For the process of devotion service, immediately service is transcendental to the modes of nature, and therefore it appears mysterious to the souls conditioned by those modes. In the previous chapter, Lord Krishna stated, Avitikno ejetamam. One may worship me in the fire by offering oblations of ghee. Also in the verse 38 of the previous chapter, it was mentioned that one should construct parks, recreational places, orchards, vegetable gardens, and so on. These serve to attract people to the temples of Krishna, where they may directly engage in chanting the holy name of the Lord. Such construction projects may be understood as purtam, or public welfare activities. Although Lord Krishna mentions in these two verses that association with his pure devotees is far more powerful than processes such as yoga, philosophical speculation, sacrifices, and public welfare activities. These secondary activities also please Lord Krishna, but to lesser extent. Specifically, they please the Lord Krishna when performed by devotees rather than by ordinary materialistic persons. Therefore, the comparative term yataha, according to the proportion, is used. In other words, such practices also as sacrifice, austerity, and philosophical study may help one become fit for rendering devotion service. And when such activities are performed by devotees aspiring for spiritual advancement, they become somewhat pleasing to the Lord. One may study the example of Vratani or vows. The injunction that one should fast on Ekadashi is a permanent vow of all Vaishnavas, and one should not conclude from these verses that one may neglect the Ekadashi vow, the superiority of Satsanga, or association with pure devotees in awarding the fruit of love of Godhead does not mean that one should give up other processes, or that these secondary processes are not permanent factors in Bhakti Yoga. The superiority of Satsanga or association with pure devotees in awarding the fruit of love Godhead does not mean that one should give up the other process of that these secondary processes of fasting in Ekadashi are not permanent factors in Bhakti Yoga. There are many Vedic injunctions instructing one to execute the Agnihotra sacrifice. There are many Vedic injunctions instructing one to execute the Agnihotra sacrifice, doing Yajna with Purusha Sukta. And the modern day followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also occasionally execute fire sacrifices. Such sacrifices is recommended by the Lord himself in the previous chapter, and therefore it should not be given up by the devotees of the Lord. By performing Vedic ritualistic and purificatory processes, one is gradually elevated to the platform of devotional service, whereupon one is able to directly worship the absolute truth. One Vedic injunction states the result awarded for fasting continuously for 1 month on 6 different occasions can easily be achieved simply by accepting a handful of rice offered to Lord Vishnu. This facility is especially offered in the Kali Yuga. Nevertheless, regulated fasting on Ekadashi is not an impediment to spiritual advancement. Rather, it is a perpetual aspect of devotional service and can be considered an auxiliary principle supporting the main principle of the worshipping of Lord Krishna and his devotees, because such secondary principles help one become fit for executing the primary processes of devotional service. They are also greatly beneficial. Therefore, such secondary principles are widely mentioned throughout Vedic literature. It may be concluded that such secondary principles are essential for advancement in Krishna consciousness, and therefore one should never give up the principle of Vrata, the execution of prescribed oaths and fasting in Ekadashi and doing Yajna. In the previous chapter, Srila Sridhara Swami mentioned that the words Ajnayavamam Gunam Dosham indicate that devotee should select Vedic principles that do not conflict with his service to the Lord. Many of them elaborate Vedic ceremonies and complicated procedures for fasting, other gods worship, and yoga practice cause great disturbance to the supreme process of Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, hearing and chanting about the Lord Vishnu. Therefore, they are rejected by the Vaishnavas. However, the process helpful to devotional service should be accepted. The example can be given by Maharaja Yudhishthira, who was instructed by the dying Bhishma in Srimad-Bhägavatam. Bhishma instructs King Yudhishthira in Dana Dharma, or public acts of charity, Raja Dharma are the duties of the king, Moksha Dharma are duties of salvation, and Stri Dharma are duties for women, and ultimately Bhagavata Dharma are pure devotion service to the Lord. Bhishma did not limit his discussion to Bhagavata Dharma alone, because Lord Krishna gave Maharaja Yudhishthira the devotional service of acting as a king, and to execute his service, Yudhishthira Maharaja required extensive knowledge of civic affairs. However, one who is not rendering such prescribed devotional service in society should not unnecessarily involve himself in the material world, even by practice of Vedic rituals. Nothing should distract him from the ultimate goal of satisfying Lord Krishna. The principle of not giving up prescribed oaths may further illustrated by the example of Maharaja Ambarisha. In the 9th Canto of Srimad-Bhägavatam, we found that although Maharaja Ambarisha performed elaborate Vedic sacrifices, his goal was always the satisfaction of the Lord. The citizens in his kingdom did not desire to go to the heaven because they were always hearing about the glories of Vaikuntha. Ambarish Maharaja, along with his queen, observed the vow of Ekadashi and Dwadashi for 1 year. Since Ambarisha Maharaja is considered to be a great jewel among the Vaishnavas, And since his behavior was also always exemplary, it is definitely concluded that such vows as fasting and Ekadashi are imperative for Vaishnavas. It is further stated in the Vedic literature, if due to negligency a Vaishnava does not fast on Ekadashi, then his worship of Lord Vishnu is useless and he may not reach the heaven. The members of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness fast from grains and beans on Ekadashi. The members and devotees of International Society of Krishna Consciousness fast from grains and beans on Ekadashi, and this vow should always be observed by all devotees. If one falsely thinks that one may obtain an association of Lord Krishna merely by great austerities, brilliant studies in Sanskrit literature, magnanimous acts of charity, etc., one's consciousness will be distorted and weakened. One should remember the example of Lord Chaitanya, who practiced Krishna consciousness by constantly hearing and chanting about Lord Krishna. If by fasting, study, austerity, or sacrifice, one becomes more fit to participate in the Sankirtana movement of Lord Chaitanya, then such activities are also pleasing to Lord Krishna. But the Lord clearly explains here that such activities can never become central in the practice of Bhakti Yoga. They must remain in an auxiliary relationship to the supreme process of Satsanga. Supreme process of Satsanga, that's important, or association with the pure devotees who hear and chant the glories of the Lord. Srila Madhvacharya has quoted from Vedic literature that if one offends the Lord's devotees and does not learn to associate with them, Lord Vishnu personally places barriers in path of such a person so that he may not enter into the Lord's company. Satsangena hi deiteya yatu dhana mriga kagaha gandharvapsaraso nagaha siddhascharana gukyaka vidyadara manusheshu vaishya shudra striyon tyaja rajastama prakrutiyam swasmin samsmin bahuva matpada prapta stashta kaya madhavedeha varsha Purusha parva balirbano mayaschata vibhishanaha sugrivo hanumaschasa sugrivo hanuman vriksho gajo grudro vanikshataha vyadaha ksubdavraje gopyo yajna putra tatha pare. In every yuga, many living entities entangled in the modes of passion, that is Tamas Guna, and ignorance gained the association of my devotees. Thus, such living entities as the Daityas, Rakshasas, birds, beasts, Gandharvas, Apsaras, Nagas, Siddhas, Charanas, Guhyakas, and Vidyadharas, as well as such lower class human beings as the Vaishyas and Shudra, women and others, were able to achieve my supreme abode. Thus, such living entities as the Daityas, Rakshasas, birds, beasts, Gandharvas, Apsaras, Nagas, Siddhas, Charanas, Guhyakas, and Vidyadharas, as well as such lower class human beings as the Vaishyas and Shudras, women and others, were able to achieve my supreme abode. Vrutasura, Prahalad Maharaja, and others like them also achieved my abode by association with my devotees, Satsanga, as did personalities such as Rasaparva, Bali Maharaja, Banasura, Maya, Vibhishana, Sugriva, Hanuman, Jambavan, Gajendra, Jatayu, Tuladhara, Dharmavada, Kubja, the Gopis in Vrindavana, and the wives of the Brahmanas who were performing sacrifice. The Lord has mentioned devotees such as the Gopis in Vrindavana and also a demon like Banasura to illustrate how he comes under the control of these who surrender to him. It is understood that devotees like the Gopis and others mentioned here obtained pure love of Krishna, whereas the demons generally obtained only salvation. Many demons were purified by association with devotees Many demons were purified by association with devotees and came to accept devotional service to the Lord as the most important among the various activities in their lives. But the exalted devotees like Prahalada and Bali Maharaja know nothing except devotional service, which they accept as their very life. Still, the reformed demons are also mentioned so that readers of Srimad-Bhägavatam will understand the enormous benefits one may achieve by associating with the devotees of the Lord, creating a satsanga. The demon Vratasura was the pious king Chitraketu in his previous life, during which he associated with Sri Narada Muni, Sri Angira Muni, and Lord Shankarshana. Prahlada Maharaj, being the son of Hiranyakashipu, is considered a daitya or a demon. Yet, while still in the womb of his mother, Kayadu, he associated with Narada Muni by sound vibration. The demon Vrishaparva was abandoned by his mother at birth, but he was raised by a Muni and became a devotee of Lord Vishnu. Bali Maharaja associated with his grandfather. Prahlada, and also with the Lord Vamanadeva. Bali Maharaja's son Banasura was saved by association with his father and Lord Shiva. He also associated with the Lord Krishna personally when the Lord cut off all but 2 of his 1,000 arms, which had been awarded as the benediction of Lord Shiva. Understanding the glories of Lord Krishna, Banasura also became a great devotee. The demon Maya Danava constructed an assembly house for the Pandavas and also associated with Lord Krishna himself, eventually achieving the shelter of the Lord. Vibhishana was also a pious nature demon, the brother of Ravana, and he associated with Hanuman and Ramachandra. Sugriva, Hanuman, Jambavan, and Gajendra are examples of animals who achieved the mercy of Lord Krishna. Jambavan, or Rakshasa Raja, was a member of a race of monkeys. He personally associated with Lord Krishna, fighting with him over the Samantakamujva. The elephant Gajendra, in a previous life, had association with devotees, and at the end of his life of Gajendra, he was personally saved by the Lord. Jatayu, the bird, who at the cost of his own life assisted Lord Ramachandra, associated with Sri Garuda and Maharaja Dasharatha, as well as other devotees in Ramalila. He also personally met with Sita and Lord Rama. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the association that the Gandharvas, Apsaras, Nagas, and Siddhas, Charanas, Guhyakas, and Vidyadharas had with devotees is not very important and does not need to be mentioned. Vanikapata is a Vaishya, and his story is mentioned in the Mahabharata in connection with the pride of Jajali Muni. The importance of association with devotees illustrated in the story of Dharmavyada, a non-violent hunter, as described in the Varaha Purana. In a previous life, he somehow became a Brahma Rakshasa or Brahmana ghost, but was eventually saved. In a previous Kali Yuga, he had the association of Vaishnava king named Vasu. The lady Kubja associated directly with the Lord Krishna, and in her previous birth she had associated with Sri Narada Muni. The Gopis of Vrindavana rendered the service to saintly persons in their previous births. Having had ample association with the devotees and participating in Satsanga, they became Gopis in Vrindavana in their next lives and associated with the externally liberated Gopis who had descended. They also had association with Tulsi Devi or Vrunda Devi, the wives of Brahmanas, performing the sacrifice, and association with women sent by Lord Krishna to sell flower garlands and betel nuts and heard about the Lord from them. Tenadita Shutraganaha Nopasita Mahattama Avartat Taptama Tapasaha Satsangan Mamupagataha. The persons I have mentioned did not undergo serious studies of the Vedic literature, nor did they worship great saintly persons, nor did they execute severe course of austerities. Simply by association with me, my devotees, they achieved me. Study of the Vedic literature, worship of those who teach the Shruti mantras, acceptance of oaths and austerities, etc., as mentioned previously, are helpful processes that please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. In this verse, however, Lord again explains that all such processes are secondary to the essential process of associating with Supreme Personality of Godhead and his pure devotees, creating a satsanga. By other processes, one may gain the association of Lord and his devotees. The word Mat Sangat can also be read as Sat Sangat with the same meaning. In the reading, Mat Sangat from association with me. Mat is also understood to indicate those who are mine or the devotees. Srila Sridhara Swami mentions that a pure devotee can advance in Krishna consciousness by his own association, since simply by associating with his own activities and consciousness, he associates with his God. The word Mat Sangat can also be read as Sat Sangat with the same meaning. In the reading Mat Sangat from association with me, Mat is also understood to indicate those who are mine or the devotees. Srila Sridhara Swami mentions that a pure devotee can advance in Krishna consciousness by his own association of Satsanga group, since simply by associating with his own activities and consciousness, he associates with the Lord. Kevalena hi bhavena gopyo gavo naga mriga yene mudadiyo nagaha siddha mami ranjasa. The inhabitants of Vrindavana, including the Gopies, cows, unmoving creatures such as the twin Arjuna trees, animals, living entities with stunted consciousness such as bushes and thickness. Such as bushes and thickets and makes such as Kalya all achieved the perfection of life and unalloyed love for me and thus very easily achieved by me. Although innumerable living entities achieved liberation by association with the Lord and his devotees, many such personalities also executed other processes such as austerity, charity, philosophical speculation, and so on. As we have already explained, such processes are secondary, but the inhabitants of Vrindavana, such as Gopis, did not know anything except Lord Krishna, and their whole purpose of the life was simply to love Lord Krishna, as indicated here by the words of Kevalena. Lord Krishna, as indicated here by the words of Kevalena, Hai Bhavena, even the trees, bushes, and hills, such as Govardhana, loved Lord Krishna. As the Lord explains to his brother Sri Balarama in the 10th Canto of Srimad-Bhägavatam, my dear brother Balarama, just see how these trees are bowing down with their branches and offering obeisances to your lotus feet, which are worshipable even by the demigods. Indeed, my dear brother, you are the supreme God, and thus these trees have produced fruits and flowers as an offering to you. Although a living entity takes birth as a tree due to the mode of ignorance, certainly by such a birth in Vrindavana, these trees are destroying all darkness in their lives by serving your lotus feet. Yamna yogena sankhya Yamna yogena sankhena dana vrato tapodharye Vyakya swadhyaya sannyase prapnayo drutavanapi. Even though one engages with great endeavor in the mystic yoga system, philosophical speculation, charity, vows, penances, ritualistic sacrifices, teaching of Veda mantras, and to others, personal study of the Vedas or the renounced order of life, still one cannot achieve me. Lord Krishna here explains that it is very difficult to achieve his personal association, even for one who seriously endeavors to reach the absolute truth. The inhabitants of Vrindavana, such as Gopies and cows, were always living with Lord Krishna, and thus their association is called Satsanga. Anyone who is favorably living with the superior personality of Godhead becomes Satsanga or eternal, and thus association of such person can immediately be awarded others pure devotional service to the Lord. There is an austerity called Chandrayana, a fast in which one's intake of food is diminished by the one mouthful each day as the moon wanes and increased in the same way as the moon waxes. When the Similarly, there are painstaking ritualistic sacrifices and grueling studies of the Sanskrit Vedic mantras, which one may also teach to others. All these tedious activities cannot award the highest realm of perfection of life unless one gets the costless mercy of the pure devotees of the Lord, as stated in the first canto of Srimad-Bhägavatam. The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only to so such useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of personality of Godhead. रामेण सार्धं मथुरां प्रणीते श्लाघलीन् छागल्किना मय्यन रुक्तचित्ता विगाढभावेन न मे वियोगः तीव्रादयोन्यहं ददृशं सुखाय. The residents of Vrindavana, headed by the Gopis, were always completely attached to me with the deepest love. Therefore, when my uncle Akrura brought my brother Balarama and me to the city of Mathura, the residents of Vrindavana suffered extreme mental upset and distress because of separation from Lord Krishna and could not find any other source of happiness. This verse especially describes the sentiments of the cowherd girls of Vrindavana. The Gopis and Lord Krishna were reveals the incomparable love they felt for him. As explained in the 10th canto, the Lord Krishna's uncle Akrura, sent by Kamsa, came to Vrindavana and took Krishna and Balarama back to Mathura for a wrestling event. The Gopis loved Krishna so much that in his absence, their consciousness was completely absorbed in spiritual love. Thus, their consciousness was completely as explained in the 10th canto, the Lord Krishna's uncle Akrura, sent by Kamsa, came to Vrindavana and took Krishna and Balarama back to Mathura for a wrestling event. The Gopis loved Lord Krishna so much that in his absence, their consciousness was completely The Gopis loved Lord Krishna so much that in his absence, their consciousness was completely absorbed in spiritual love. Thus, their Krishna consciousness is considered the highest perfectional stage of life. They were always expecting that Lord Krishna would finish his business of killing demons and return to them. And therefore, their anxiety was an extremely moving, hot trending display of love. Anyone desiring true happiness must take to the devotional service of the Lord in the spirit of Gopis, giving up Anyone desiring true happiness must take to the devotional service of the Lord in the spirit of the Gopis, in the Satsanga, giving up everything for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. Tavasta Kripa Presta Tamananita Mayayam Brindavana Gocharena Kshanardavattam Punarangatasam Hinamaya Kalpasama Babu. Dear Uddhava, all of these nights that the Gopis spent with me, their most dearly beloved in the land of Vrindavana, seemed to them to pass in less than a minute. Bereft of my association, however, the Gopis felt that these same nights dragged on forever, as if night were equal to the day of Brahma. Sri Sridhara Swami comments as follows: the Gopis suffered extreme anxiety in the absence of Lord Krishna, and though outwardly appearing bewildered, they actually achieved the highest perfection of stage of Samadhi. Their consciousness was intimately attached to Lord Krishna, and by such Krishna's consciousness, their own bodies seemed to very far away from them, even though people normally consider their body to be their closest possession. In fact, the Gopis did not think about their own existence, although a young woman normally considers her husband and children to be her dearmost possessions. The Gopis did not even consider that the existence of their so-called families, nor could they think of this world or life after death. Indeed, they were not at all aware of these things. Just like a great sages who became detached from the names and forms of the material world, the Gopis could not think of anything because they were wrapped in loving remembrance of Lord Krishna, just as rivers enters the ocean. Similarly, the Gopis completely merged into the rivers. Gopis completely merged into the consciousness of Lord Krishna through the intense love. Thus, a day of Brahma seemed like a single moment for the Gopis when Lord Krishna was present with them, and a single moment seemed like a day of Brahma when Lord Krishna was absent. The Krishna consciousness of the Gopis is the perfection of spiritual life, and the symptoms of such perfection are described here. Tanavidmayanushangam baddha diyam swamatmana madastetavam yata samodo munayo bitoyo sadyas pravishta iva yamarupe. My dear Uddhava, just as great sages in the yoga trance merge into self-realization like rivers merging into the ocean, and are thus not aware of material names and forms. Similarly, the Gopis of Vrindavana were so completely attached to me within their minds that they could not think of their own bodies. The entire consciousness was simply bound up in Krishna. The words Swam Atmamam Adas Tatedam indicate that while for ordinary persons one's personal body is the most near and dear thing, the Gopis consider their own bodies to be distant and some remote, just like as young Gopis in Samadhi were consider their own bodies to be distant and remote, just as yogi in Samadhi trance considers ordinary things around his physical body or his physical body itself to be most remote. When Krishna played on his flute late at night, the Gopis immediately forget the words Swam Atmanam Adas Tadatmam Tatedam indicate that while ordinary persons, one's personal body is the most near and dear thing, the Gopis consider their own bodies to be distant and remote. Just as yogi in Samadhi trance considers ordinary things around his physical body or his physical body itself to be the most remote. When Krishna played on his flute late at night, the gopis immediately forgot everything about their so-called husbands and children and went to dance with Lord Krishna in the forest. These controversial points have been clearly explained in the book of Krishna by His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The basic explanation is that Lord Krishna is the source of everything and the gopis are the Lord's own presidency. Thus, there is no discrepancy or immorality in the Almighty Personality of God's loving affairs with His own manifest potency, the gopis, who happen to be the most beautiful young girls in the creation of God. There is no illusion on the part of the gopis, for they are attracted to Lord Krishna that they do not care to think of anything else. Since all existence is situated within the body of the Lord Krishna, there is no loss for the gopis when they concentrate on the Lord. It is the nature for very deep love to exclude all objects except the beloved. However, in the material world, where we try to love a limited quantity, a limited temporary object, such as our nation, family, or personal body, our exclusion of other objects constitutes ignorance. But when our love is intensely concerned on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the origin of everything, such concentration cannot be considered ignorance or small mindedness. The example of the sage in Samadhi is given here only to illustrate exclusively concentration on a single object. Otherwise, there is no comparison between the ecstatic love of the gopis and the dry meditation of the yogis, who merely try to understand that they are not their material bodies. All those hundreds of thousands of gopis, understanding me to be their most charming lover and ardently desiring me in that way, were unaware of my actual position. Yet by intimately associating with me, the gopis attained me, the supreme absolute truth, Vaikuntha, in the end of their life. The words Ashwarupa Vidhe, Ashwarupa Vidaha, not understanding my actual position or form, indicate that the lovely gopis were so completely absorbed in conjugal love for Lord Krishna, but that they were not aware of Lord's unlimited potencies. As the Supreme Personal Godhead, Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura explains this and other meanings of the word Aswarupa Vidaha. Aswarupa Vidaha. In Sanskrit, the word Vida means to acquire. Thus, Ashwarupa Vida indicates that the gopis, like other pure devotees of the Lord, were not interested in achieving Swarupya Mukti, the liberation of acquiring a bodily form similar to the Lord's, where the gopis to obtain bodily form like the Lord's. How could the Lord execute his conjugal the Ashwarupa Vida indicates that the gopis, like other pure devotees of the Lord, were not interested in achieving Swarupya Mukti, the liberation of acquiring bodily form similar to the Lord's, where the gopis were the gopis to obtain a bodily form like the Lord's. How could the Lord execute his conjugal pastimes of dancing with the gopis and embracing them? Since the gopis had realized their eternal spiritual forms as servitors of the Lord, the word Swarupya also may indicate their own spiritual bodies, and thus Ashwarupa Vidaha means that the gopis never thought as materialists do of their own bodily beauty. Although the gopis are the most beautiful girls in the Lord's creation, they never thought of their own bodies, but rather were always meditating on the transcendental body of Lord Krishna. Although we cannot imitate Although the gopis are the most beautiful girls in the Lord's creation, they never thought of their own bodies, but rather were always meditating on the transcendental body of Lord Krishna. Although we cannot imitate the gopis' exalted conjugal feelings, we can follow their superb example of practical Krishna consciousness. They naturally took shelter of Lord Krishna and achieved the highest perfection of life. Therefore, my dear Uddhava, abandon the Vedic mantras as well as the procedures of supplementary Vedic literatures and their positive and negative injunctions. Disregard that which has been heard. Disregard that which has been heard and that which is to be heard. Simply take shelter on me alone, for I am Supreme Personality of Godhead, situated within the heart of all conditioned souls. Take shelter of me wholeheartedly, and by my grace be free from all fear in all circumstances. Uddhava was telling to Lord Krishna, O Lord of all masters of mystic power, I have heard your words, but the doubt in my heart does not go away. Thus my mind is bewildered. In the first verse of the 10th chapter of this canto, the Lord stated that one should take shelter of him and execute one's duties within the Varnashrama system without material desire. Uddhava interpreted this statement as recommending karma mishra bhakti, or devotional service mixed with tendency toward fruitive activities of karma. It is a fact that until one understands Lord Krishna to be everything, it is not possible to retire from ordinary worldly duties. Rather, one is encouraged to offer the fruits of such work to the Lord. In verse 4 of the 10th chapter, the Lord recommended that one retire from worldly duties and systematically cultivate knowledge, capturing him as the Supreme. Uddhava understood that this instruction to indicate Jnana Mishra Bhakti, or devotional service to the Lord mixed with a secondary desire to accumulate knowledge. Beginning with verse 35 of the 10th chapter, Uddhava inquired about the process of material conditioning and liberation from natural life. The Lord replied, Lord gave his reply, stating that without the Lord replied elaborately, stating that without the devotional service, the process of philosophical speculation can never be perfected. In the chapter 11, verse 18, the Lord emphasized the importance of faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in verse 23, Krishna extensively widened his discussion of devotional service, emphasizing that one should be faithful and hear and chant glories of the Lord. The Lord concluded that both the development and perfection of devotional service depend on association with the devotees, that is Satsanga. In verse 26 of 11th chapter, Uddhava inquired about the actual ways and means of devotional service and about the symptoms of devotional perfection. And in verse 48, Lord Krishna And in the verse 48, the Lord Krishna stated that unless one takes to the process of devotional service, one's attempt for liberation will be useless. One must associate with the devotees of the Lord and follow in their footsteps. Finally, in the verse 14 of this chapter, the Lord categorically rejected the paths of fruitive activities and mental speculation, and in the verse 15 recommended one exclusively surrender unto him with all one's own heart. Having received such elaborate and technical instructions on the perfection of life, Uddhava is bewildered and his mind is afflicted with doubt about what he should actually do. Lord Krishna has described many procedures for the results of such procedures, all of which ultimately lead to the single goal of Lord Krishna himself. Uddhava therefore desires that Krishna Lord Krishna states in simple terms what should be done. Arjuna makes a similar request of the Lord at the beginning of the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura, Uddhava is stating here, my dear friend Krishna, first you recommended that I perform worldly activities within the Varnashrama system. And now you advise that I reject such activities and like to the path of philosophical research. Now I simply surrender. My dear friend Krishna, first you recommended that I perform worldly activities within the Varnashrama system, and then you advised that I reject such activities and take to path of philosophical research. Now rejecting the path of jnana, you recommended that I simply surrender unto you in Bhakti Yoga. If I accept your decision in the future, you may again go back to your original point and recommended worldly activities. By his boldness in disclosing his mind, Uddhava reveals his intimate friendship with Lord Krishna. Sri Bhagavanuvacha Saesho Jivo Vura Prasutihi Pranena Goshena Guhyam Pravishtaha Manomayam Sukshmamupetyam Rupam Matra Swaro Varna iti Svavishtaha. Supreme Personality of Godhead Lord Krishna is telling Uddhava, my dear Uddhava, the Supreme Lord gives life to every living being and is situated within the heart of along with the life air and primal sound vibration. The Lord can be perceived in his abode or in a subtle form within the heart by one's mind. Since the Lord controls the minds of everyone, even great demigods like Lord Shiva, Supreme Personality, Godhead. My dear Uddhava, the Supreme Lord gives the life to every living being and is situated within the heart along with the life air and primal sound vibration. The Lord can be perceived in his subtle form within the heart by one's mind. Since the Lord controls the minds of everyone, even great demigods like Lord Shiva, the Supreme Lord also assumes The Supreme Lord also assumes a gross form as the various sounds of Vedas, composed of short and long vowels and conscious consonants of different intonations. When sticks of kindling wood are vigorously rubbed together, heat is produced by contact with air, and a spark of fire appears. Once the fire is kindled, ghee is added, and the fire blazes. Similarly, I became manifest in the sound vibration of the Vedas. Lord Krishna here explains the most confidential meaning of Vedic knowledge. Vedas first regulate ordinary material work and channel the fruits into ritualistic sacrifices, which ostensibly reward the performer with the future benefits. The real purpose of these sacrifices, however, it is to accustom Lord Krishna explains the most confidential meaning of Vedic knowledge. The Vedas first regulate ordinary material work and channel the fruits into ritualistic sacrifices, which ostensibly reward the performer with the future benefits. The real purpose of these sacrifices, however, is to accustom a materialistic worker to offering the fruits of his work to a superior Vedic authority. An expert fruitive worker gradually exhausts the possibilities of material enjoyment and naturally gravitates toward a superior stage of philosophical speculation on his existential situation. By increased knowledge, one becomes aware of the unlimited glories of the Lord Supreme and gradually takes the process of loving devotional service to the transcendental absolute truth. Lord Krishna is the Lord Krishna is the real goal of Vedic knowledge, and the Lord states in Bhagavad Gita, Vedascha Sarvaivar Aham Eva Vidyaha. The Lord gradually becomes manifest in progression of Vedic rituals, just as fire is gradually manifest by rubbing the firewood. The words Havis Samayadaha, the fire increases by adding ghee, indicate that Lord Krishna considered Uddhava to be the most qualified person to hear this elaborate transcendental knowledge. Therefore, the Lord mercifully instructs Uddhava so that he may enlighten the sages of Badrikashrama and thus fulfilling the purpose of the sage's life. The functions of the working senses, the organ of speech, the hands, the legs, the genital, and the anus, and the functions of the knowledge, acquiring senses, the nose, tongue, eyes, skin, and ears, along with the functions of the subtle senses of mind, intelligence, consciousness, and false ego, as well as the function of the subtle pradhana and the interaction of the three modes of material nature. All those should be understood as by material manifest. When many seeds are placed in an agricultural field, innumerable manifestations of trees, bushes, vegetables, and so on will arise from a single source, the soil. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who gives life to all and is eternal, originally exists beyond the scope of cosmic manifestation. In the course, when many seeds are placed in the agricultural field, innumerable manifestations of trees, bushes, vegetables, and so on will arise from a single source, the soil. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who gives life to all and is eternal, originally exists beyond the scope of the cosmic manifestation. Lord, who is resting place of the three modes of nature and the source of the universal lotus flower in which the cosmic manifestation takes place, divides its material potencies and thus appears to be manifest in innumerable forms, although he is one. Just as woven cloth rests on the expansion of legitimate Just as woven cloth rests on the expansion of lengthwise and crosswise threads, similarly, the entire universe is expanded on the lengthwise and crosswise potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is situated within him. The conditioned soul has been accepting material bodies since time immemorial, and those bodies are like great trees sustaining one's material existence. One's material body produces the various results of the material existence. The tree of material existence has two seeds. This tree of material existence has two seeds, hundreds of roots, 3 lower trunks, and 5 upper trunks. It produces 5 favors and has 11 branches and a nest made of 2 birds. The tree is covered by 3 types of bark, gives 2 fruits, and extends up to the sun. Thus, those lusty after material enjoyment and dedicated to family life enjoy one of the tree's fruits, and swan-like men in the renounced order of life enjoy the other fruit. One who with the help of the bona fide spiritual masters can understand this tree to be a manifestation of the potency of one supreme truth appearing in many forms, actually knows the meaning of the Vedic literature. The 2 seeds of the trees are sinful and pious activities, and the hundreds of roots are the living entities innumerable of material desires, which chain them and material existence. The 3 lower trunks represent the 3 modes of material nature. 3 modes of material nature are Sattvika Guna, Rajasika Guna, and Tamasika Guna. And the 5 upper trunks represent the 5 gross material elements. The tree produces 5 flavors: sound, form, touch, taste, and aroma, and has 11 branches: the 5 working senses, the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, and the mind. 2 birds, namely the individual soul and super soul, have made their nest in this tree, and the 3 types of bark are air, bile, and mucus, the constituent elements of the body. The 2 fruits of this tree are happiness and distress. Those who are busy trying to enjoy the company of a beautiful woman, money, and other luxurious aspects of illusion enjoy the fruit of unhappiness. One should remember that even in the heavenly planets there is anxiety and death. Those who have renounced material goals and taken to the path of spiritual enlightenment enjoy the fruit of happiness. One who takes the assistance of bona fide spiritual masters can understand that this elaborate tree is simply the manifestation of the external potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is ultimately one without a second. If one can see the Supreme Lord as the ultimate cause of everything, then his knowledge is perfect. Lord has not achieved the perfection of life. The Vedic ritual, otherwise, if one is engaged, entangled in Vedic rituals of Vedic speculation, without knowledge of the Supreme Lord, he has not achieved the perfection of life. With steady intelligence, you should develop unalloyed devotional service by careful worship of the spiritual master, and with the sharpened axe of the transcendental knowledge, you should cut off the subtle material covering of the soul. Upon realizing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you should then give up that axe of analytic knowledge. Because Uddhava had achieved the perfection of personal association with the Lord Krishna, there was no need for him to maintain the mentality of a conditioned soul, and thus, as described here by the words Sampadya Chetanam, Sampadya Chetamanam, Uddhava could personally serve the lotus feet of Lord in the spiritual world. Indeed, Uddhava requested this opportunity at the beginning of this great conversation. As stated here, Guru Pasanna Eke Bhaktaya. One can achieve pure devotional service by worshipping bona fide spiritual master. It is not recommended here that one give up the pure devotional service or one spiritual master. Rather, it is clearly stated by words of Vidya Kutarena that one should cultivate knowledge of the material world as described by Lord Krishna in this chapter. One should fully understand that each and every aspect of the material creation is the expansion of the illusory potency of the Lord. Such knowledge works as sharpened axe to cut down the roots of material existence. In this way, even the stubborn subtle body created by the 3 modes of nature is cut to pieces, and one becomes apramataha. One should fully understand that each and every aspect of the material creation is the expansion of the illusory potency of the Lord Krishna. Such knowledge works as a sharpened axe to cut down the roots of material existence. In this way, even the stubborn subtle body created by the 3 modes of nature is cut to pieces, and one becomes apramatha, or sane and cautious in Krishna consciousness. Lord Krishna has clearly explained in this chapter that the cowherd damsels of Vrindavana were not interested in an analytical approach to life. They simply loved Lord Krishna and could not think of anything else. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught that all his devotees should follow on the footsteps of the cowherds, damsels of Praja in order to develop the highest intensity of selfless love of Godhead. The Lord Krishna has elaborately analyzed the nature of the material Lord Krishna has clearly explained in this chapter that the cowherd damsels of Vrindavana were not interested in an analytical approach to life. They simply loved Lord Krishna and could not think of anything else. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught that all his devotees should follow the footsteps of the cowherd damsels of Praja in order to develop the highest intensity of selfless love of Godhead. Lord Krishna has elaborately analyzed the nature of the material world so that the conditioned souls who are trying to enjoy it can cut down the tree of material existence with this knowledge. The words sampadya chetamanam indicate that a person with such knowledge has no further material existence because he has already achieved the personality of Godhead. Such a person should not loiter in the kingdom of Maya. Personality of God, such a person should not loiter in the kingdom of Maya, perpetually refining his understanding of the illusory creation. One who has accepted Lord Krishna as everything may enjoy eternal bliss in the Lord's service, yet even though he remains in this world, he has no more business with it and gives up the analytical procedures for negating it. Lord Krishna therefore calls Uddhava Tejastram, give up the acts of analytic knowledge by which you have to cut down your sense proprietorship and residence in the material world. Thus ends the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada at the 11th Canto, the 12th chapter of the Srimad-Bhägavatam, entitled Beyond Renunciation and Knowledge. Tomorrow we are reading the 13th chapter, in which Hamsa Avatara, Lord Krishna answers the questions of the sons of Brahma, Sanat Kumara. Namostu Anantaya Sahasramurtaye Sahasrapadakshirva Sahasranamne Purushashte Sahasrakoti Yugadarane Namaha Sahasrakoti Yugadarane Namaha Akashat Patitam Metagat Sagaram Sarvadeva Namaskaraha Sri Kesham Pranatyo Namaha Sarva Vedeshat Punyam Sarva Tirteshu Atpalam Tatpalam Prapta Vasanad Vasudevasya Vashtante Jagatrayam Sarva Bhuta Nivasosi Vaste Namastevom Namo Kaya Navacha Manasendriyarva Buddhatmanava Pakrite Sabhava Karomi Yat Sagaram Parasmai Narayanaeti Samarpayami Narayanaeti Samarpayami Narayanaeti Samarpayami. In about 15 to 20 minutes, I will explain the Purusha Sukta, the meaning of Purusha Sukta. Purusha Sukta is we are chanting while doing Abhisheka for Lord Krishna and Lord Venkateshwara and Lord Rama. All Vishnu avatars. Abhishekas are done by Purusha Sukta. And the meaning of Purusha Sukta, somebody asked me, can you explain the meaning of the Purusha Sukta? I'm going to come in 15 minutes. I will chant the Purusha Sukta. Thank you very much. Thanks.